Scott, and I am not going to lie, I am no green thumb. This summer we did some gardening nutrition lessons with kids over in the summer school program at Fort Totten, and I brought Scott along with me to run the show because I really have no idea what I'm doing. And I remember I came back, was it a week or two after we planted our first group in the cups, and they were lined along the window. And I looked at Scott when we walked in, and I'm like, they grew! And he goes, well, what did you expect for it to happen? I just am not really a green thumb. I can dig up the stuff and I can eat it very well, but growing it is not, I'm learning a lot. I want to thank you for letting me come in here today and talk to you guys. I wanted to hit a little bit on the food safety aspect of it. Food safety is a very important thing that we all need to keep in mind, whether or not you're gardening or just feeding your family on a daily basis. And so I'm just going to hit on some of the points of how to keep your produce safe. As we know, farmers markets are growing in their popularity. This year, there's brochures on the table. I saw the Going Local. They even started a program this year where you could donate your excess produce to food shelters. And so it's really catching on with people. People are looking for that healthy, fresh, homegrown food and getting back to the roots. Just from 1994 to 2002, this is an old statistic, but 79% then alone, and I would guess in the last year that's soared. Advantages, takes out the middleman. New growers can perfect their production skills and learn what products are high in demand. Some people get really into gardening, like Scott had said that that's something that's really a passion of his, and he can share it with other people when the zucchinis grow too much. Or I know last year one of the jokes was if you left your car doors unlocked in my hometown of Park River, you would end up with a box of zucchini in the back of the car because everyone had more than what they could tolerate. The fees for space are minimal and little to no packaging is required at a farmer's market, whereas if you would sell this in other places, you may have to box it or package it in plastic wrap or whatever, the containers. And then most regulations are already taken care of by the sponsor. They make sure that you're doing things right before they bring you in and allow you to display. Vendors are responsible for the safety of the products that they offer. It should be wholesome and safe, because if you're not happy, just like in a restaurant, if you bought a bad tomato, chances are that you're probably not going to go back to that vendor next time and try to get a tomato. A little bit on food safety now. Foodborne illness is an infection or illness caused by bacteria or virus transmitted by food. U.S. food supply is very safe. Food illness is something that continues to be a national public threat, though. Every once in a while we hear about E. coli or salmonella. There was the spinach, a few years ago, spinach was a major concern. Actually in college I learned from one of my teachers, when it comes to cooking meat thoroughly and chicken and thoroughly with the food thermometers, people laugh about that. They don't want to buy the food thermometers. They don't have the time to stick a food thermometer and wait for it. But just a little statistic for you to make you think maybe twice about buying that food thermometer. I have some over at the extension office. 1 in 4 chickens has salmonella, so you need to, and cooking will destroy it. So you need to make sure that with eggs, when they say don't consume raw eggs, there are reasons for that. When they say to cook your chicken to proper temperatures, there are reasons for that. So it's important to listen to those regulations and follow them. So, as I said, just making sure you guys are listening. Who's responsible for the safety of the products offered? Don't all yell at once.
Vendors.
Thank you. Yay. I should have brought prizes. There's lots of handouts on the back, help yourself. According to USDA, if you are selling peeled, cut, or cooked fresh fruit, what must you do? Refrigerate it within 2 hours, cover it with wax paper, cover it with plastic, and place it on the display table.
A.
You are correct. All right. The increases in foodborne illnesses coming in contact with the fresh produce, the number of people that are susceptible to getting sick from this stuff has increased. Our population is an aged population. The baby boomers are all getting up there, and the very young and the very old are most likely to contract an illness or to be more affected by it. And so since we have a larger population that's older, there's more foodborne illness. I think that maybe this is just my own personal theory on the side, but there's also a lot of older people that you talk to that have the theory, I haven't died yet, so I'm not going to change my ways. So, my grandma's one of them. Every time I come to her house, she will say to me, we're going to do things my way. I haven't died yet, and neither have you. And until somebody does, nothing changes. So, yeah. Locations for buying produce have changed tremendously. Consumer preferences have changed. They eat out more often, and salad bars are more popular. And there's a lot of regulations and standards for those salad bars, but at the same time, are they always being followed? Microorganisms have adapted to stressful environments. The bugs are getting smarter too. So. Farm owners and workers need to commit to keeping the food supply safe. It's our responsibility, and I think farmers markets give us a great opportunity to do that. You know where your food is coming from, and so you can deliver a safe product with ease of mind to your customers. Some of the sources of potential on-farm contamination. What are some that you guys can think of? Different things on the farm that might make your food.
Humans.
Humans? Water source? Okay.
Means of fertilization.
Fertilization? Okay. Storage? Well, I have a ton here. Okay, so there's a lot of different ways that your food can become contaminated. Maybe some that you haven't really thought of on that list. All right, so really safe handling of fresh fruits and vegetables is not anything that you need to have a degree to understand. It's really simple, easy steps. You can follow general recommendations, and we have handouts on them in the back. It's important to follow these regulations every time, whether you're growing, whether you are giving these products away, whether you are at the grocery store and you're buying products. These are the 6 steps. We want to check, clean, cook, separate, chill, and throw away. Check to be sure that the fresh fruits and vegetables that you buy are not bruised or damaged. The areas that are bruised or damaged, they tend to have, that's where the bad things lurk that might make you sick. We want to check that fresh fruits and vegetables like packaged salads and pre-cut melons are refrigerated at the store. Do not buy them if they are not refrigerated. Just a little FYI, some produce does come waxed, so it helps retain moisture and growth. It helps inhibit mold growth, protects from bruising, prevents physical damage and disease, and it enhances appearance. Some commonly waxed produce. People wonder if waxed produce is safe. And it is. Only a drop or 2 is used when they do wax the produce, and they have to meet regulations of the FDA. So obviously they have to do follow rules and be safe with that. The wax is difficult to remove with washing. If you prefer not to consume it, you can peel it, but you take away that fiber. My mom and I have a power struggle in the kitchen. I am a rabbit. I love fresh fruits and vegetables, and like with my mashed potatoes, I like to keep the skins on. She does not, because they have never kept the skins on her side of the family, and that's weird. It alters the flavor in her mind, which it doesn't. But that's where all the fiber is. Same with apples. Why are you going to sit down and eat an apple if you're going to peel the peeling? I don't know. But some people really don't like peelings, but then you're going to lose the fiber. Also, you can buy unwaxed commodities, and the USDA does not recommend produce detergents. You might see some stuff in the store where you can spray this on your fresh fruits and vegetables to wash it with. The USDA does not recommend those. Also, you do not need to use soap to wash your fresh fruits and vegetables. We'll talk about that in just a second. Does everyone in here know the proper way to wash your hands? I know that's a really seemingly silly question, but I honestly wonder how many people actually know the proper process. The biggest thing is you want to scrub for 20 seconds. You can sing the ABC song, or you can make it your birthday twice every time you wash your hands. But the 20 seconds is really big. And if you have children in your house, this is especially important that you're washing your hands frequently and correctly so that the kids catch on. Before you are cutting your fresh fruits and vegetables, you want to make sure all the areas that might touch that food are cleaned and sanitized. Rinse under tap water. You do not need to wash your fresh fruits and vegetables. I had a roommate in college that one of her other roommates used to use soap to wash the vegetables, and she could never understand why the flavor always seemed off. I don't get it. You do not need to wash anything that claims that it's ready to eat, washed, or triple washed. And you can rub the skins to help remove some of the wax, or use a vegetable brush. Dry them with a clean cloth towel or paper towel, and like I said, USDA does not recommend the detergents. When you're shopping, I don't know how many of you guys pick up, you start over in the produce aisle and then you end around the meat, or maybe the meat is mixed in there somewhere. If you'll notice, in some grocery stores they actually have the same kind of plastic bags that you would put fresh produce in over in the meat department, and you'll want it, there's a reason it's there. It's somebody didn't get lazy and forget to walk it over to the produce. You can actually put your poultry or your hamburger or whatever you picked up into that bag, and then you'll want to keep it separate from your fresh fruits and vegetables, because if some of that leaks onto your stuff and you don't even know, and then you eat it, you could get sick. So there's a reason. And then you'll want to keep them too at the grocery store. Watch when they're bagging your stuff, and just pay attention that they're keeping the meat separate. A lot of times they know that they need to put it in a different bag or whatever, but it does slip once in a while, and so just keep an eye on it.
I have just a little bit of a short notice as far as coming to speak here, but I just put some thoughts together, some things. I've had kind of a passion for gardening ever since I was a little child on the farm, and my grandparents instilled it in me, and some of my family likes to do it and some doesn't, but I've kind of stuck with it and kind of active gardener and things. And the Kathy Wiederholt, I would just like to emphasize what a real good resource she is at Carrington. I went through her tours before there, and actually every time I come out of there I'm kind of rejuvenated and pumped up to try some of these things. Last year I ordered some of those Carmen Jewels cherries, and I put some Ascaps in as well. So I'm going to give my green thumb a try at those. The Carmen Jewel cherries One of mine looks fair, the other one croaks, so I'm not sure what I did. I killed one of them. But some neighbors got some. But we put an order together, and I got a kind of a message to the internet that there was an order going to be placed, and I put my name in, and I ordered, I think, 80 of those haskaps or honeyberries, and 30 or so of the cherries, and just by word of mouth, I had some friends who got some, and they're trying them too, and hopefully within a few years we can get something to taste. If somebody would like to maybe go to Carrington someday and meet with Kathy and go through there on a tour, I think if we twist her arm a little bit, she might do an additional tour for some folks if they want to go there. But she is extremely knowledgeable, and you talk about passion. If you weren't fired up when you get there, when she's done with you, you will be. She's a wonderful resource, and they've got a very, very neat program there, trying some of these new things as well as some of the old things that we've been doing for many years. As far as what the markets will bear, I'm going to tell you right now, I don't know. I go to a few of these markets. I have a friend in the Twin Cities, and he started with garlic, and he grows quite a few, just pounds and pounds of garlic, and they were doing well at the market, but as people saw what they have in their markets, pretty soon they're growing. So there's more competition, so his prices may have had to be altered a little bit, but whatever the market or the people are willing to spend, I guess. I talked to him last year. He had a 40 by 60 Quonset, and then another garage full of garlic that he was curing. So he's gotten into a pretty good size, and he's recently, they put together a website and stuff, and they're getting some hits from outside interest in places. He's getting some wholesale accounts set up where he can sell bulk, because he had so much produce, and you can only sell so much to those markets. But in visiting with him, there's a ton of hard work that goes along with it. Up early and home late and getting ready for the next show. And they do it down in St. Paul. And just to get in on some of the markets, it's quite competitive. And what gave him the edge to get started in there was he had kind of novelty thing with all these garlic varieties from around the world. And at the time he started this, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago, there wasn't a lot of garlic, so that kind of gave him an in. Some of our markets here, I don't know how, they're probably not as competitive as in a big populated area like that. But he's found success in it, and they're doing very well. And they went on and they're planting some of these Zestar and various apple trees. And hopefully in time he'll do well with that. But it's a lot of hard work, a lot of dirt hard work. You need a good back. Just as far as what the market will bear, I got a small strawberry patch in my backyard, and I kind of push the kids, get out there and pick those berries and drag your wagon down the street and knock on doors, and people will buy them. Some think, God, these are too expensive. A little basket like this for $5, but once they taste them, they're asking every year, and they want some more. But it's very labor intensive, and I find myself doing more picking than I like, but at least they might be able to save up and buy a hockey stick. My little guy, he made like $165 from a little small strawberry patch that we have in the backyard last year. I dabbled with some melons years ago. I grew a bunch of these yellow doll. They were seedless watermelon, and I had some acreage, and I grew them, and boy did they ever grow. One year I just had truckloads of them. And right away I got into some of the markets, the super values and things like that in Fargo, and they bought them, and then I got some more that were right. But by that time, the key there was to get in there early before somebody else does it. If you had something that was right, early, ready to go, they'd bend over backwards to buy them. But as time went on, pretty soon everybody had them, and they didn't want them nearly as much. I thought I really had something until the next time I came to try to sell them something. Then I went around town and I put them on everybody's doorstep, along with some pumpkins, because I just didn't have an outlet for them. So establishing a market is crucial. I'll just talk a little bit about some tips, gardening tips, and some things that I've tried. It's probably a good idea, especially getting started, I think, with a piece of ground, to try to get your weed under control ahead of time if you can. I know there's a lot of places they don't want to use any chemical or anything like that. and like they have the organic theme. And, but with that, it comes a little more labor and things to keep the weed competition down. And it's good to have things mapped out, and on the back of most seed packets, it tells you the spacing and things like that. But if you could just sketch something out, you know how big your ground is, and you can kind of put a map in there, and then follow that with planting, and then it'll pay some benefits down the road. As far as location I'm going to talk vegetable gardening now. I have a site that gets probably 8-9 hours of direct sunlight in the middle of the summer. It's probably preferred to have at least, for like tomatoes and things, like at least 6 hours of direct sunlight a day. I find that if you don't get that, the plants get on the little leggy side. They don't have near the production, so a good sunny location is always best. I work for the Extension Service out of Minnewaukan, and I get a lot of gardening questions, tree questions, and things like that. And over the years, I've been in Minnewaukan since 1992, and every year I've got people coming to me, what can I do with these deer and the raccoons, rabbits, and things like that. And I've tried some of the homemade remedies with the chopped up cayenne pepper and the Elmer's glue and things like that. It works, kind of. But those folks that I visited, I just take note of their gardens. A lot of them, if you've got deer and stuff around, I don't care if you hang the hair of a redhead out of the beauty shop, those deer, they get accustomed to that after a while. Some people will have Irish Spring soap hanging there to try to keep the critters away, that's scent. And it may work marginally, but over time they become accustomed to it and get in and raise havoc with these gardens. And probably the most effective thing that I've seen people have success with, especially with deer and raccoons and things like that, if you run a hot wire around your garden, whether it be a solar-powered electric fence or a battery-powered one, an electric one, they seem to have the most success. For rabbits and raccoons, I think your first wire you probably want about 6 inches off the ground. Depending on if you have deer or not, you can move that up again. But almost everybody I've talked to, they have great success with those electric fences, and they don't get all their hard work beaten up and eaten up. With the strawberries and raspberries and things like that, I had a few years I didn't have any bird problems, but it seemed like once those birds found my patch, they knew right where to go. And the baby robins were living in my strawberries just down, and they couldn't hardly fly yet. They knew how to eat. I think their mother must have showed them how, because they raised havoc with them. So I went with some of this netting. It's just a fine mesh plastic netting, and actually it's reusable if you take care of it. I put it out over that, staked it down, and it worked very, very well to keep them out of there. Another thing I ran into lately was slugs, mainly in the strawberries and tomatoes, and they raised quite a bit of havoc with the produce and made it not very appealing. I would find myself picking a nice, beautiful berry, and then it had a bunch of slug feeding injury on it. Well, I might cut that off and eat it, but if you're going to go to sell it, people want stuff that looks good. And so I used something called Slug Away, and it was just a granular thing I put down on my patch. It knocked the population back quite a bit. And I only used it one time. If I would have continued, I probably would have eliminated it. But it was highly effective.
Where did you find that?
I guess think I got it whole economy.
Okay.
Local garden centers have that stuff, and it was easy to use. As far as your soil site selection, generally you know if you got a fertile piece of ground that's productive, but what I did over time, my soil was a little bit on the sticky side. I added a lot of organic material, whether it be lawn clippings, leaves, one of those bales of sphagnum peat moss, and I just tilled that in and worked it in over time, and my drainage got a bit better. The soil wasn't so sticky and stick to the crop nearly as much. As far as planting dates, there's a lot of different publications out there, but NDSU has a number of them. There's one called Everybody's Garden Guide. We can get it available, get some copies. And there's another one here on how to start how to succeed at seed starting. And there's charts on here that tells you if you're going to use transplants, how many days prior to a killing frost and things, when to start your seeds and things like that. It's a neat chart. For a lot of things like tomatoes and things like that, I'm not into commercial production or hardly at all. I just give away some of my extra stuff. But I find it pretty easy to just go to your garden centers and buy some transplants. And when it's time to go, I transplant those in there and have real good luck that way. You certainly start from seeds. You're going to save some money starting from seeds. The big thing is to have quality light, and if you use artificial light, if you start them too early, they're going to get leggy on you and flimsy and not be very, very tough when you put them out there. So that's why I went with the ones in the greenhouses. But on the commercial side, you probably save a fair amount of money if you were to start your own. As far as the planting dates, some of the hardy ones you can put in some of these vegetables very early, like broccoli, cabbage, onions, radish, spinach. They'll tolerate light frosts. And there's some of the earliest ones. You can probably put them in around the 20th of April. Then there's some moderately hardy ones. Plant those if you're going to go with seed 1 to 2 weeks prior to the last killing frost. And for our area, it's around May 21st or so, give or take a week or so. And there again, in sowing stuff, I like to watch the soil temperature and things. Beans and things like that require nearly 50-degree soil temperature, so it doesn't do you any good to put them in there, early May or late April, because you're probably going to have seed-borne disease take over. So watching that soil temperature is important. Some of these moderately hardy ones, 1 to 2 weeks prior to killing frost, would be like your beets, carrots, cauliflower, lettuce, and potatoes. Some of the warm season ones. I would say probably don't get too excited about putting any of those in the ground, whether they're transplants or seeds, until around May 25th and maybe even after that, the end of May. And there again, I always watch the forecast. If we got a 2-week stretch or week stretch that looks favorable, I might jump ahead a week or so and try to get a jump on the growing season. And that tends to help. Some of those warm ones that are real tender to any, even a 32-degree evening is gonna make a mess for you. The greatest beans, green beans, squash, tomatoes, peppers, your watermelons, cantaloupe, things like that, pumpkins, pretty susceptible to those cooler temperatures. So there you really got to watch that. And there again, some of these publications are very good about talking about that. Generally, like if you're seeding corn, and I see a lot of people in every community will sell sweet corn. But if you're going to plant that, you probably want to go around the 10th of May or the 20th of May. And corn has the ability, if it does get a frost, the growing point stays down below that soil surface for up until the 5-leaf stage. So even if it would get nipped off by frost, it's not going to kill that corn plant. The growing point is down below. It'll initiate growth, and it will come. It may set it back if it gets frost off, but a lot of the growers here with their field corn, they're putting it in first week of May, maybe even the end of April. And certainly they have seed treatment on there. A lot of times that seed will stay in the ground. It will not germinate until the temperature gets up to a certain point. But I've seen corn in the ground for 3 weeks and dug it up, and it looks like they put it there 2 days prior to it. That corn, it tends to have some built-in abilities to take a bit of a frost. As far as the thinning, I know when I plant a row, whether it be beets or carrots or anything like that, it hurts me to go thin them out and waste some of these things. But if you don't thin them out, from experience, they'll grow together like this, and your carrots won't get the size, and they'll be disfigured because they're growing. There's just too much competition there. So you got to have a proper spacing is really good there. I've been battling weeds in my garden. Well, everybody does that has, and I've had this patch for a long time. And finally, I thought last year looked at some products. The NRCS has something called this weed barrier, and you'll see that in a lot of tree plantings. It's about 5 feet wide, maybe 6 feet wide, and it's a thin layer. The moisture will permeate through it, but it's a wonderful tool in keeping down your weeds, and a step if you don't want to use any chemicals. It's another tool that you can use with weed control. And I knew some growers who grew some cantaloupe in the Grand Forks area. Actually, there were a couple of extension agents, and they grew them on the side, and they had quite a market there. But the key to their successful cantaloupe production was they used a black plastic, and what it did was to warm that soil up early on, and those roots flourished once they took off. If they wouldn't have used that black plastic to help with weed control as well as warming up the soil, they wouldn't have had nearly the productivity and got those melons to market early on. And this past year, I tried some plastic. It's just, I think it was 4 or 6 mil. I used clear, and I just laid down a mat of it, and I threw some soil on the edges to hold it down, put some rocks and things on there, and it worked wonderfully for weed control. What I found with the clear plastic, the weeds still came up and grew underneath it, and which I was kind of disappointing. I thought it would get so hot and uncomfortable for them, they wouldn't be able to survive. But they were able to grow underneath that, and they probably went to seeds. Some of them went to seed, so a little later on in the growing season, I put a bunch of lawn clippings on there and didn't allow the light to go through. They killed them down and did a wonderful job. I grew my tomatoes with that plastic poly, and what else? I grew some peppers in it and some squash, and everything just lined out on top of it. And I don't have a big rotation in my particular area. I kind of put the tomatoes in close proximity to where they were every year. And they had huge disease problems, late blight, early blight, and what I found that it came from the soil, rain splash. The disease would start on the bottom of the plants by mid-July or so, depending on if we had a wet growing season. I had all my foliage was burnt out my tomatoes. I used this mulch last year. I grew them in exactly the same spot I did the prior year, and my tomatoes were clean up until probably the second or third week in August. It worked wonderful for disease control. I didn't spray any fungicides on them this year, and just maybe the third week in August, fourth week in August, I started to get a little bit of disease started in them, and some varieties tolerate a lot better, but it was a bacterial blight. And so that plastic helped tremendously with weed control and disease pressure, and it conserved moisture. What I did underneath, I kind of made a little bit of a mold, so to speak, and I just cut a hole about, I don't know, 4 or 5 inches around. I put my transplants right into it. I had the soil hilled up on the sides, and it held the moisture in there. I went into the spring with a real moist profile. I did water a little bit occasionally, but with building up that soil around the base of those cucumber plants or tomato plants, I poured it right in that hole. I wasn't watering the whole garden, all the soil where all the weeds were. The only ones getting the benefit of that water were what I wanted to grow in my produce. So that worked quite well. And I'm going to do it next year. I think I'm going to use a black poly so I don't have that weed growth underneath pushing up my plastic and stuff. And I don't think they'll be able to grow underneath with that black poly on top. But the rain didn't penetrate it, because it's plastic. It just shed the water. But I found if I just go step on a place or kind of push the plastic down, that water would run right in the hole at the base of my plant. So I'm sold on it, and I'm probably going to use it again this year. As far as some recommended varieties, NDSU has a publication here, and it's got asparagus, beans, beets, broccoli, tomatoes, all this stuff, and I have some copies back there. If somebody's interested in some of these things, they can certainly grab one. There's a lot of different varieties on here. Somebody talked a little bit about the heirloom varieties that they're not as pretty to grow. They don't produce as much, but boy, do they have a good flavor. A friend of mine brought some of these brandy wine tomatoes this year, and we had some sandwiches with them, and they were just wonderful. And something like that, I would say, an heirloom variety, you could probably get a little bit more money for it at the market just due to the flavor. I think if somebody, wants to taste it, have one or two there, have some of them sliced up, if they want to try them and compare, that'd be a bit of a selling point for you, just based on flavor alone. But a lot of those aren't going to produce nearly as much as some of the other varieties. And I always, with tomatoes, I always try to get the ones that have the built-in disease resistance in them, and that helps to keep diseases somewhat at a minimum too, especially if you've got marginal conditions for disease to start. They'll keep clean, so I think that's important as well. And at any rate, we're in the phone book in the extension office over in Minnewaukan, and I'd entertain questions or anything related to gardening or trees, shrubs like that. But there again, don't overlook, if you're thinking that small food production, give Kathy a call over at Carrington Research Extension Center. Like I said, if you get some people together and want to go for a tour over there sometime, I think we can twist her arm. Otherwise, we can wait till the field day next year, but she does a wonderful job. With that, I'll submit.